Literal first shot, straight out of the box. I've done nothing except load the mags. Will the Montenegrin pistol work? That is a fantastic start. Thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and this is the Tara Perfection TM-9. Now, Tara Aerospace is a factory in Montenegro. If you're not familiar with Montenegro, it is located on the Adriatic coast, nestled comfortably between Albania to the south and Bosnia-Herzegovina to the north, just across the sea from Italy. There is one significant firearms manufacturing facility there. It was formerly a government-run arsenal. It was privatized in 2013 or 2014, and it was purchased by one, or at least in part, by one Heinrich Thomet, who previously of Brugger and Thomet. And if you've seen the movie War Dogs, Bradley Cooper's character in War Dogs is based on Heinrich Thomet. There's a reason he is not part of B&T anymore. Is not the best reputation following that gentleman around. But Thomet sees this factory and presumably, I think, says, look how cheap that factory is down there in a particularly economically depressed part of the Balkans. I can buy that factory, we can make pistols, because how hard can it be to make some pistols, and then we'll sell them at a tremendous profit to the Americans, who will buy basically anything. Sounds like a great plan. So the first pistol they come out with is this, the TM-9, and it's terrible. It has significant quality control problems that Thomet probably didn't recognize when he got into this whole deal, or he might have thought twice about doing it in the first place. But I'm speculating here a little bit. I'm filling in some of the cracks with intuition here. I suspect after making a couple thousand guns, the factory is in need of cash flow. They have to sell something. And so the TM-9 is not a very good pistol, but they sell approximately 3,000 of them to a European distributor with the understanding that they're not going to be sent to the United States. The US is an important, valuable market for a firearms manufacturer, and you don't want to destroy your brand reputation in the United States if you plan to make a lot of money selling stuff here. So it's not clear if there was a formal contract that these wouldn't go to the US, or just some sort of handshake understanding, or maybe it was a one-sided understanding that the European distributor didn't even know existed. But what ended up happening was Century International Arms ended up buying them all out of Europe to bring into the US, which came as a rude surprise to Tara when they discovered it. So Century buys them stupid cheap. They're polymer-framed, striker-fired, very modern-looking service pistols. They came with 3 magazines each originally, and they were so cheap that Century basically looked at them and went, you know, boy, we really can't go wrong. Turns out they kind of could go wrong. So they bring them into the country, and Century's gunsmiths take them out on the range to see what they're dealing with and discover that the guns just don't work. In particular, they have problems with the slide not going all the way back into battery. So it'll feed part way, but not all the way. Spoiler, we're going to take this to the range, and we might or might not see exactly that problem with it. But Century is now kind of stuck with these guns. Like, at a certain point, they're so cheap, how can you go wrong? But none of the guns actually work. So they clearly have gone wrong. Century is trying to figure out what to do with them, and they get an offer from Gander Outdoors, associated with, well, the retail store is Gander Mountain. Parent company is Gander Outdoors, which was, at the time, buying and selling new and used guns. And they were associated with an outfit called America's Gunsmith Shop. And the deal that went down was essentially Gander will buy all of the guns as a batch, Century will throw in 3 cartridges for each gun, and Gander will just have the gunsmith shop fix them all. And so this sort of basically happens, except before Gander can actually sell the guns, they decide that, you know what, actually screw it, we're getting out of the gun business, we just don't want to deal with this. Unclear if this was because of the direct experience of the Tara TM-9 or if it was just coincidental. It's probably just coincidental. But Gander is now sitting on 3,000 of these guns that may or may not work now, having been at least to some extent worked over by some gunsmiths, and they're not going to sell them, and so they go back to Century and like, hey, will you buy these back from us? And so Century agrees and buys them back for presumably less than they sold them in the first place. Now Century, once again, is stuck with these guns that might actually be better now. At this point, they do start selling some of them. They get out onto the market, and the American consumers who buy them discover how badly they suck. That even with the work that the gunsmithing company did, they're still not reliable guns most of the time. And this comes as very unpleasant news to Tara. Tara never wanted these guns to be in the US because Tara knew that they were crap. And the unspoken part here is apparently Tara was perfectly happy to screw over its European customers, which I can say I kind of understand from some experience working with European gun owners. Once a firearm crosses international boundaries in Europe, it can be really hard to send it back for any sort of work or repair. Even with top-level brands who would normally be happy to support their customers, if they don't have an established presence in a European country, European owners of that brand are going to have a really hard time dealing with them. And in this case, I suspect Tara was perfectly happy, like, we're going to sell these to some dudes across Europe, and we don't care they don't work, because what are they going to do about it? Who cares? There's not that big of a market for modern handguns to European civilians anyway. And what they wanted to do was raise money to keep working to develop a better pistol that they could sell to the US, where their brand reputation is more important, and make a ton of money. So they find out that their guns are now being distributed in the US, and this is a problem. And the explanation that they come up with, and I certainly don't want to be guilty of misrepresenting here, but if you go look at Tara's website, they have a warning on their website from just a couple years ago that says that the first batch of experimental TM-9 pistols were only intended to fire rubber bullets. They were not intended to use real ammunition, and someone got misled somewhere along the way, and they got sold in the US as real guns, but they're actually not real guns, and you should not shoot them under any circumstances, and they should all come back or be thrown in a bucket or something. This being the excuse for why does the gun suck and not run reliably. Now, I defy you to show me what on earth on this pistol makes it designed for rubber bullets. This, to me, sounds like a completely fabricated story, because, like, I've seen guns designed specifically for non-lethal cartridges, whether it's like the Russian style of traumatic projectile thing. They're pretty clearly distinguishable from real guns, and this is a real gun right here. Also, I've run 100 rounds through it, and while it didn't run most of them reliably, it certainly didn't explode. There's nothing to suggest that this is not intended to be a regular pistol. Anyway, Tara is also, at this point, trying to sell Century its new guns. Like, we have the new one, and I'm pretty sure that this is the TM-9X, which is the tactical model, which is also now available in some numbers in the US somehow. I'm not sure who exactly brought them in, but it apparently is an improved version, and Tara's trying to sell these to Century, and Century is going back to them and basically saying, look, we'll consider buying more stuff from you because it's what we do, but you gotta take this thing off your website that says that these first ones that we got are gonna hurt people, because they're not gonna hurt people. Like, this isn't gonna work. Well, fairly recently, Century actually did find a buyer for them, and all the remaining stock was sold to Centerfire, or to Centerfire Systems, who is currently selling them with pretty much this whole story explained on their website for dirt cheap. They're under 200 bucks. This one didn't actually come through them. I bought this prior to that happening. I found it on Gunbroker for $185 plus shipping, which I kind of like Century. I figured, how can I go wrong for that? Now, also in fairness, I recognized in advance how bad of a pistol this was. It's funny, when Century bought these initially, they bought them, and then they went to one of their representatives in the Balkans, you know, who had some local knowledge, and said, hey, we just, you know, we're looking at these Tara pistols. What do you think about those? And their rep went back and went, oh, geez, don't buy those things. Those are total crap. And Century's response was, well, oops, we already bought 3,000. I guess we'll sell them to somebody. So had they done a little bit more research, they probably wouldn't have been stuck in this situation in the first place. But that's the wacky story behind how the Tara TM-9 came into the US and what it's gone through since it got here. Now, mechanically, this is a very basic pistol. It's a polymer frame, it's a Browning action, so it's a short recoil, tilting barrel, it's striker fired. The one thing that makes it a bit distinctive from other modern service pistols is the fact that it has a double action only fire control system. Now, Tara calls this DARE, double action rapid engagement, which is just marketing lingo for its double action. The reason that it's double action is because it is simpler. Both the internal mechanism of the trigger can leave out a number of parts if it's strict double action. And by the way, double action on a striker-fired gun means in its current state, when it's just sitting there, the striker is all the way forward with absolutely no spring tension on it. It's not protruding out the breech face because there is a firing pin safety to prevent that. But this cannot conceivably fire without the trigger being pulled. Most striker-fired pistols made today have a striker that is basically halfway cocked when the slide is cycled. So that's why if you dry fire a Glock or any other generic striker-fired pistol, you dry fire it once, you get a click. If you continue to pull the trigger, you don't get anything because the striker, you have to rack the slide for the striker to reset back onto the sear. On this, the striker always resets all the way forward, which means the trigger pull is responsible for pulling the striker all the way back and fully compressing its spring before releasing it to fire. That makes it simple and very safe, much like a double action revolver, but it also means the trigger pull is very long and very heavy. So most of the manufacturers out there look at this trade-off and decide to go with a partially pre-cocked striker in order to get a better trigger pull. Tara looked at it and went with the other option, probably not because they wanted a safer trigger pull, but probably because they wanted a simpler and cheaper to manufacture pistol. So that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a closer look at this, and then we'll take it out to the range and do some shooting, because why not? It's not like it's only made for rubber bullets and it'll explode and kill me, right? The gun arrived in this little zip carry case with, I mean, you say Glock knockoff, well, Tara perfection right there. And this is the factory logo there. Inside, we've got a pistol with 2 magazines and an instruction manual, which we don't need to even bother looking at. Take a look at the markings here. Tara is the factory that made it. Crna is Montenegro in Montenegrin, so that's the name of the country of origin. This being a polymer-framed pistol, not one of the modern chassis systems. We have a metal insert with the serial number there on the bottom of the frame. Also, Tara and Crna on the frame itself, our serial number up here, caliber 9x19, and designation, this is the TM-9. These are our US importer markings. It's worth pointing out that since this came out a few years later, they also introduced the TM-9X, which is the tactical version, which makes a number of changes, most of them basically aesthetic, to the pistol. The magazine is pretty standard, typical stuff, double stack, single feed, 17 round capacity. It is nice that there's a witness hole for every round of capacity, so you can tell exactly how many rounds are in it at any time. The only 2 controls here are the trigger and the mag release, both of which are ambidextrous. The mag release works from either side. Obviously, trigger is ambidextrous. There is no manual safety, and you may notice that there is no trigger safety. There's no trigger dingus in there. And that's because this has a true double action striker pull. So the striker, when the gun is at rest like this, the striker is completely detensioned, and pulling the trigger pulls the striker back and back and back and back and back, and there we go. There it fires. And your reset is right out there. Now this does a couple of things. It simplifies the gun. You'll see inside there are a lot fewer parts than you'd have on a gun with a partial striker reset. It negates the need for a manual external safety or a trigger safety because the trigger pull, like a revolver, like a double action revolver, is so long and so heavy that it really provides its own safety mechanism. Like, you have to drop this from outer space for there to be enough inertia to fire this trigger if it gets hit on the back of the gun. So it really is a safe system in that way. Good points to it. There are interchangeable backstraps to change the fit of the gun, although mine didn't come with any different ones, just this one that was in the gun there. We've got 3-dot sights. They are dovetailed in place, so in theory, if you want to replace the sights, you can. The lockup is totally standard. It's a Browning-style system where the locking surface is the front of the barrel and the top of the slide there. We do have a rail on the front if you want to put a light on it. And then to disassemble it, note that we do have You're going to copy the Glock. Well, you can pick which version of the Glock you want to copy. We do have finger grooves on here. On the tactical model, they got rid of these. To take it apart, we're going to lock the slide open, pivot the disassembly lever down. This is pretty typical stuff. Slide goes forward, comes right off the frame. So let's start with the slide up here. We have a self-contained recoil spring. That's good. We have a barrel. This is all, again, pretty basic stuff. There's our striker. We have a safety here. So if this is not pushed upward, the striker can't come forward far enough to protrude and fire. When I do push that down, the striker can protrude and actually fire around. So we've got a back plate in here, and I can pry that out with a screwdriver. It's a polymer back plate. There's our striker assembly and its spring. Here is the extractor spring. So we take that out, and then the extractor is going to just come out like that. This looks a lot like a SIG extractor. So there's your slide, disassembled, not fully, but close enough. And then the frame is just a polymer frame. There is a sheet metal piece in here to provide some slide rails so that the slide's not just running on polymer. And then the trigger mechanism right here is, as I said, very simple. So we've got this bar, which is going to come back. It's going to push the striker back with that tab until at the very end of travel. And then we've got the trigger mechanism here. So it's a complicated looking part, but it's basically just one component here that comes back when you pull a trigger. So this little tab right there is what pushes the safety right there, the firing pin safety, up and out of the way. If I turn this around, this tail right here is going to grab the bottom of the striker, and it's going to pull it back until at the very end of travel, it drops down just slightly, right there. It's kind of hard to see here, but right at the end of travel, it drops, and that releases the striker to fire. And you don't need a disconnector, because if you're holding the trigger back, this has dropped down, and the slide will cycle, and the striker will not be held back. It's just going to snap forward. And so you have to release the trigger and pull it a second time to fire a second shot. So making sure that this only fires semi-auto instead of full auto is really pretty simple on a system that doesn't reset the striker, on a system this simple. So that's kind of it. We've got our slide hold open here. We've got 2 more metal tabs that act as slide rails at the back. And that's about all there is to it. There's basically all the parts of a disassembled Tara. It's a simple pistol to make, and if it is made well, there's no reason it wouldn't function just fine. The trigger pull is a real user taste thing. The downside to it, of course, is that the trigger is long and heavy, and it's going to be more difficult to shoot this accurately and effectively than it would a lighter trigger, and that's why the lighter triggers are by far the more popular option for most companies. But if you want to totally max out on economizing the construction of the pistol, this is a pretty good design. So let's take it out to the range and see how it does with more than just a couple of rounds. All right, let's do a little more shooting and see if it continues to malfunction, or if it breaks itself in, or if it just breaks itself. Just have to push it back into battery, There we go. I can actually feel the slide chunking the last little bit into battery as I release the trigger each time.
it's actually getting a little bit better. The trigger press is still really quite heavy. The back strap is a bit uncomfortable. Like right up here, it's a little bit too square and it's hitting on the thumb. That blood blister, by the way, is not from the Tara, but it needs a little secondary encouragement, like most of the time. All right, so I am still holding the trigger back. This is what's happening every time. When I release it, so I think what's happening is the striker, like it's holding the striker back. And when I release the trigger, the slide clips back into battery. Well, but not always. Boop. Interesting that if I fire it a little faster, that problem goes away at least a little bit. So, all right. It is cool how simple, yes, pulled out that patch specifically for this video. Thank you, bloke. It's a simplistic gun. Like there isn't anything revolutionary about this style of pistol anymore. By going with straight double action, they've simplified the mechanism. It ought to be fairly simple to put together and get working well. For the price, like, I mean, this thing was 180 bucks plus shipping. So I guess, what do you expect? But on the other hand, if it doesn't work reliably, is it worth even a really cheap pistol? Holy cow, that trigger's heavy. Yep, well. All right, so 2 failures to go completely into battery. The edge of the back strap here kind of cuts into the knuckle of your thumb a little bit. It's a little bit uncomfortable. The trigger is just super long. It really is a true double action trigger, which simplifies the gun, but it sure doesn't make it easier to shoot. Just for kicks, I've got a mini Mozambique out there at like 25 yards, 20 yards. That's going to be a little harder. There's another. So you can see here the barrel's not quite all the way up in battery. The slide's slightly too far back. And all it takes is a little push, but it does take that little push. Also, it throws the brass directly back into my hat every time, which is a little bit distracting. There you go. That's what's going on in slow motion. I apologize for the excessive muzzle climb. I was doing that weak hand one side, so we got good lighting on it. But that's what we got going on here. Except it doesn't always come back. Right onto the microphone. It appears if I run the trigger faster, it works more reliably. I just don't hit as much because I'm not reacquiring the sights each time. All right, didn't lock open on the mag. The malfunctions are magnifying or multiplying now. That's really crazy. It's like literally, if you gank the shot, it works. But if you try and take a close, careful, like proper follow through on the trigger shot, it malfunctions. Like the gun is specifically designed to be shot badly. Right in there, every time, works flawlessly. Now, my long range target. Boop. All right, well, it did lock open. So there's your Tara TM-9 Montenegrin perfection. Thanks for watching.